we are restaurant first, right? Because the diners don't pay us, and the diners are a very important part of our business, but they're not paying us. The restaurants pay us. The restaurants keep the lights on. The restaurants keep all of us employed. So if they're not doing well, by definition, we are not doing well. Our incentives are very, very aligned. Like, we need to be doing everything we can to help restaurants thrive.
You just heard from Debbie Su, CEO of OpenTable, and this is On the Pass. I'm your host, Gabriel Ornelas. Each episode, we serve up inspiring conversations with dynamic figures across food, beverage, and hospitality. When was the last time you called a restaurant asking if they had a 7 p.m. reservation available for a party of 4? Depending on where you're at in the world, the answer's probably you can't remember. The advent of reservation technology and applications has improved and streamlined the experience for both the diner and the restaurants. But in more recent years, reservation platform competition is steep. And our next guest is on a mission to support restaurants and win back market share of a sector her company helped innovate 26 years ago. But first, welcome to On the Pass. I'm Gabriel, and I'm so glad you're here. If you follow us on Instagram or LinkedIn, you may have seen we recently curated and hosted On the Pass experiences with our friends at Compass Box Whiskey in Los Angeles and Verite Wines in beautiful Sonoma, California. In addition to producing valuable content on this show, we are deeply passionate about building community and creating memorable moments for audiences in collaborations with many of our brand partners. Stay tuned for more to come. If you're new to this podcast, welcome. Make sure you give us a follow on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts so you can keep up with all our upcoming and past episodes. If you aren't following us on LinkedIn or Instagram, I highly, highly recommend you do. We will be providing updates across our channels for future On the Pass experiences and collaborations that you won't want to miss. You can click into our show notes to find those links to follow us on our social channels. Just last week, we released On the Pass original docu-short titled Rare, A Chef Story, featuring Chef Sean McDonald of Bar Monette and Burgette in Santa Monica. Sean was Hotspot episode 63. I highly recommend you listen to that episode and check out our short film. The link is in the show notes. I hope you enjoy. Our next guest is Debbie Su, CEO of OpenTable. This legacy tech giant was founded in San Francisco in 1998 with a vision for creating an efficient and enjoyable restaurant reservation system. The company is now owned by Booking Holdings Incorporated and continues to be the leading provider of online restaurant reservations. But being the first, largest, and the oldest player in the space doesn't mean you're the best. Debbie joined the company in 2020 during one of the most challenging times for the restaurant industry, and she inherited an OpenTable that wasn't quite operating as quickly as it needed to, and the competitive landscape was fierce. Over the past decade, platforms like Resy have made tremendous strides, along with its recent acquisition of Tock, in having platforms that elevate the restaurant reservation experience, capturing some of the best restaurant and chef partners. Debbie, along with her team, are on a mission to reclaim some of that lost time and lost restaurant partners with an offensive approach and new partnership with Visa. In a recent San Francisco Chronicle article, which highlighted that the company, in quote, seems to be shedding its reputation as an old guard. And Debbie has made it abundantly clear in saying, I want to make the best reservation system on the planet. In this episode, you'll hear how she plans on doing that. Now let's get into my conversation with Debbie Su, CEO of OpenTable. I read a little bit about sort of your belief system around leadership and this people-first mindset of being critical to a company's success. And I don't have to tell you this, but that rings just as true in restaurants and in hospitality. Sometimes, as you know, the human capital is even more important and sometimes difficult to retain or acquire than the actual capital. But
how do you balance focusing on the tech while also bringing the necessary human element to the table in your work?
I love that question. And my husband and I actually talk about this all the time. He's also a CEO. He's an entrepreneur in hardware manufacturing. And we're very different people. And for him, when he's faced with a challenge, he thinks technology and infrastructure and process and structure solves it. And whenever I'm faced with a problem, I think people solve it. Yes, the technology and all the processes and the infrastructure is really important, but at the end of the day, it's still run by people, right? And so I think it's a great question, and it's one I think a lot of leaders think about. But I am very much of the opinion you could have the best product in the world, right? And you see this in some companies, but your customer service could be terrible. Like every touch point a consumer has with your company could be really terrible because at some point you're going to be talking to a human. In that way, I'm very lucky that the industry I work in, of course, is enabled a lot by tech, but is run by people. And we are a technology company, but we are a hospitality company first, right? So of course, we're deploying AI to help make our customer support agents more effective and faster, or so they can focus on more complex issues to solve, right? But at the end of the day, like the hard ones still get solved by people. And I don't think that's going away anytime soon. And certainly a sale or a partnership, that's done face to face by people. And it's one of the things that I love about our industry.
Yeah, well, I think this conversation is being had across so many different platforms, but even certain tech that may be, I don't want to say taking certain people's jobs or maybe taking it off their plate, it's allowing the rest of the group or the rest of the experience to really kind of shine and focus. So like, I don't think it is taking away. I think it's sort of augmenting sort of a bigger picture of allowing a more memorable experience, which I talk about it so much on this show. Like that's ultimately the business that every one of your restaurant partners is in.
That's right.
Whether it's a fast casual or it's a fine dining, they all are trying to offer a memorable experience so people come back and tell their friends.
That's right. That's right. We really think that restaurant technology, whether it be in the form of a kiosk, right? If you're a fast casual, or a chat bot that answers the phone for the restaurant and makes the booking, right? Which we recently just partnered with Poly AI and Slang AI. And so we have restaurants adopting this technology. It does free up your people to do more elevated hospitality experiences, right? So maybe instead of taking orders, if you're a fast casual, you're doing something else in the back, right? Or greeting guests. Right. So again, we also do not think it's a replacement for humans, but we do believe, or I do believe, that people who are attuned and educated and knowledgeable about how to deploy AI and use the tools will replace people who do not. Right. So you need to know what's going on and you can't be scared of using it. Right. Because I think the way the world is going, we're there. We're in that, it's not even that we're going in that direction. We've already arrived.
We're here. We've arrived.
Yeah. And so no matter what kind of role you're in, what kind of business you run, you need to be knowledgeable about what the technology can do. Right. And I think that's where people are going to be able to differentiate themselves between, hey, I know how to use AI tools. I'm not scared of them. It makes me so much more productive, whatever it is, versus, yeah, that's not for me.
Yeah, I have some questions later on in our conversation about AI and some articles that came out. But there was an article that you said something about the previous iteration of OpenTable, and I'm calling it the previous iteration because we'll get into kind of all the work that you're doing now. But you said the company was operating perhaps not as quickly as we needed to in the restaurant tech space, and like a lot of competition had come in. A lot of competition has come in, is here. I think you all are still the biggest and you're also global, but we have a large listenership of chefs and restaurants, some of which are partners of yours, some of which may be thinking about being partners of yours, or partners of some of your competitors. But take me back from that statement to here we are today. of this really massive ramp up into capturing back your restaurant audience and really offering not only a best-in-class experience for them, but also, really engaging diners who may have stepped away or may not have opened the app in a little while.
Right. Yeah. So as you said, OpenTable is the oldest of the online reservation platforms. We were started in 1998. We are the largest. We continue to be the largest. We've been the largest largely through our company history. And all of those are great. But we also want to be the best, right? And we can say we're the oldest, we can say we're the largest, but can every one of us say confidently that we're the best? And in some ways, yeah, for some types of restaurants, we are. But in others, we may not be. And so the last 4 years since I've been at the company have been about, let's make sure we're the best, both for restaurants and for diners. And when I joined in the middle of the pandemic, here's an example. When I joined in August of 2020, right? So we're 5 months into the pandemic. Lots of restaurants were still closed, right?
A very challenging time.
Yeah, it was a really rough time to come in. It was a terrible time for restaurants. It was a challenging time.
They're like, go get them, Debbie.
Yeah, exactly. And the P&L was, very not pretty, right? Ours was not either because we had waived fees for restaurants because many restaurants were not open, right? But then we still were employing teams. And we, like many companies, went through a reduction in force and, did all of those things. And a month into my time, restaurant churn is a metric that I look at a lot. So who's left us? How many? Why? Did they leave us for someone else? Did they go out of business? And the churn numbers continued to be the way they were as if COVID had not happened, as if we had not waived fees. And so, I start digging. Oh, well, they're churning. I was like, how could they churn if they're not paying for it? And the reason was because when we offer you the free deal during COVID times, we're also making you sign a 2-year contract to use OpenTable. And if you remember during the pandemic, most restaurants couldn't see beyond next week, right? They didn't know if they were going to be able to pay rent. Like if they were going to get relief from all the various other vendors, they owed money to. And so I was like, why would we do that? Like all the goodwill we would garner from waiving fees, right? Which is, right? Again, like we were not making any money during that period. But then to lock them into a 2-year thing was like, oh, but that helps secure the business going forward. I was like, I don't know, man. And so that was one of the first things I did as CEO. I was like, get rid of the term clause, right? And we offer it for free, no strings attached. Like if we're going to do it, let's actually do it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think one of the biggest things I've done while I've been at OpenTable is to be very clear with our employees, with our restaurants, that we are restaurant first, right? Because the diners don't pay us, and the diners are a very important part of our business, but they're not paying us. The restaurants pay us. The restaurants keep the lights on. The restaurants keep all of us employed. So if they're not doing well, by definition, we are not doing well. Our incentives are very, very aligned, right? So let's not dance around the bush here. We need to be doing everything we can to help restaurants thrive, to be filling their seats, to be running their books productively, optimized, all of those things. And so I think in that way, there's been more clarity at OpenTable in terms of what we stand for and what we mean to do. And so, and it's this quest to be best, right? Are we best? Yes, we're biggest, we're oldest, all those things, right? Some have called us a dinosaur. All fair things. But are we the best?
In technology terms, that is.
Yeah. So I would say that's the journey that we're on. And, it's really cool and invigorating to see that pendulum, to your point, kind of swing back our way a little bit. And it's rewarding because we've been working so hard in the last 4 years to make sure that our product is best and really invest there, right? To make sure that narrative of we want to take care of our restaurants. We are in it for our restaurants. All of that is being said, and that we want to have all sorts of different kinds of restaurants on our platform.
Yeah. No, I know diversity is key, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But being restaurant first, and I've talked to obviously you and I've talked to your team, and I do love that everybody really does echo that sentiment. Good. Everybody that I've spoken to, on the you're like, good, okay, that's the way it's supposed to be. But you said that's why OpenTable has funneled more resources to restaurants, and I love what you said. If we don't have the restaurants people are looking for, we won't have the diners.
That's right.
Full stop.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yes. People at OpenTable used to always say okay, more restaurants, more diners. It's this flywheel, right? Mm-hmm. Which kind of assumes that if you were allocating resources, you would put the equal amounts in both, because both drive and both are very, very important. But there is a starting point to the flywheel, right? And the starting point is to have the restaurants.
Yeah.
So if we don't have the restaurants, it's exactly like you said, no diner is going to be so loyal to a platform because it's really easy to use or whatever it is, if we don't have what they're looking for. And so the first step in our journey is to make sure we have the restaurants that diners are looking for on our platform. Mm-hmm. Right. And then the second step, and we don't talk about this very much, but certainly in 2025 and in 2026, we're very focused on the consumer journey while making sure we're not, taking, our pedal off the gas on the restaurant side. But yeah, the OpenTable consumer app or website is largely unchanged. I think it's very easy to use, but I also think it looks like it's from 1998. And I say this to my product team, so don't worry, I'm not offending people. Right? And so
they've heard it before.
They've heard it before. We have to make sure that we are keeping up with the times. We are making sure that we have the tools for how diners of a certain generation are searching and discovering. And,
100%.
It might be through lists, but right now it's TikTok, it's Belly. It's not necessarily long form content from Eater anymore. Right? There's a lot of other ways that people are figuring out where they want to dine. And we need to make sure that our product captures all of that. Right.
Yeah, and you meet them where they are.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think it's so important. I mean, I've had conversations with some of your team members, and it's as simple as how do you make restaurants want to be on OpenTable? And you're sort of talking about the different elements of it, but it makes me think of sort of brand equity, brand perception. You can tout all you want, we're the oldest and we're the biggest, but you also really have to, and you're doing it, meet customers where they are, but also reinvent. And it's almost like you kind of have to focus on being a media and storytelling company, in addition to being a great tech platform and service the restaurants, but also be a vehicle for discovery.
Yes.
In a lot of ways. And I think that's how do you encapsulate and make the diner think about it's more than just a booking tool, but it's a space where I can go if I don't know where I want to eat tonight, essentially.
That's right. That's exactly right. And I would say historically on the consumer front, we publish blog articles. Some of them are very well written. We're doing all the things, but we don't have a consistent editorial voice, nor do we talk about restaurants that are not on OpenTable's platform, right? So all the many problematic things that we will change, right? To make sure that we are a platform for discovery and not just a utility function of booking. Mm-hmm. But it's also making sure that we're partnered with where our diners are, right? So Belly's an example, Instagram, right? So we can't be precious about, it has to happen on OpenTable. I'd love for the activity to happen on OpenTable, but I'd also love to power the dining booking, on some of these other platforms as well, right? Because again, that's meeting our consumers where they are. And if they're discovering that way, great. Let's make it really easy for them, because at the end of the day, that's what's good for restaurants.
Yeah.
Right? That's helping restaurants fill as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, you're owned by Booking Holdings. You have to report to shareholders and all of that. But at the end of the day, if you are for restaurants and you are for the industry, then you kind of have to put your money where your mouth is and go, you know what? We are going to tell great stories. We're going to uplift the industry. We're going to uplift restaurants as a whole. Majority might be on our platform, but we also want to uplift, certain stories that, I think that's the right approach, in a lot of ways. And I talk so much about community building on this show. and also have had individuals like Jamila Robinson, the editor-in-chief of Bon Appetit, where we're like, let's stop being in conflict with each other in the industry and let's support each other.
Yes.
And I think there's a world in which your shareholders can be wildly excited about the business, but you can also be supporting the industry.
That's right.
Like as well. And your competitors can be doing the same thing.
Yes, exactly. That is so in line with how we think about it. I follow our competitors on Instagram. Instagram is actually the one I'm thinking about, right? At Resi and Talk. And they're doing some great stuff, like with the hurricanes that, like, right in the last few days, Southern
Definitely.
Smoke. And it's just great to see. Right. And so that might not necessarily be us, but I know that they're also doing great things to help support restaurants in the industry as well. And so I think at the end of the day, like all of these platforms tout that they're there for the restaurants, they're there for the industry. And, when they do show up, I think that's great. Right. And I think it's great that there's competition, right? Because it's not just one player and it forces each of us to be better and faster, more innovative, right? Because it's a brawl out there trying to, it really is. Like I go
Debbie,
on
you're
these
like,
meetings.
I'm going to call a spade and it's a full on brawl out there.
It's a fight, like we're in there pitching, like I go on and pitches like this year. I think I've done over 50 meetings, 50, right?
Wow.
Amy Way, who's my COO.
In person?
Yeah. In person. She's done over 100. Like this is not scalable. We know, but that's how much we care. Like each one we get. Like we really, really, really care.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's also just a great way to learn about what's going on. I go in the restaurant, it's not just a Zoom. I will go in, I see the flow of service, all of that. Like sometimes it's a prospect. They're not using us. It's a great way to gather data, build relationships. But yeah, I personally do it. And I make the rest of my exec team do that as well, because that's the best way to learn. You have to be there to see it.
Yeah, you do. And that's what I meant, Debbie, about the human element as well. And that balance is, you're a big company. You have a lot of things to do, but like that touch point, that human touch point is so important, especially in restaurants, especially in hospitality. So I love to hear that you're, although it may not be scalable for you into the future, but that, you've made a valiant effort and 50 meetings, that's quite a lot.
No, but they're so fun. I actually think it's the best part of my job, even when it's a prospect and they're not on us, but like to be able to meet restaurateurs in their restaurant, in their home, like what a treat, what a privilege. It really is the best part. So that's also why I do it, because it's just fun. And it reminds me like why I'm so lucky to have the job that I have and why I have such passion for the space.
Is there a story from maybe one of those specific meetings or, a partner that you remember, something that sort of stuck with you?
Sure. There's a lot, but the one that comes to mind
one
first
of the 50. Just pick one of the 50.
The one that comes to mind first is, so when I first became the CEO, Angie Marr, formerly of Beatrice Inn, now of LaBie, she was terminating her contract. And our account team, in an effort to save her, was like, well, can you talk to our CEO? So Angie reluctantly agreed, and we got on the phone for about 30 minutes, and she did not mince words when it came to all the things that OpenTable had done wrong. Like there were bad words in there. She was very passionate. And yeah, like from her, like I could see why she was so disillusioned and upset with us. And so at the end of the call, I was like, listen, Angie, I'm so sorry. I'm not ready to try to pitch you to win you back. But when I am, you will be one of my first calls. So 3 years after that, and I had met her in person. I went to her restaurant, when I was visiting New York. 3 years after that, she came back. And this summer, we were hosting an event at LaBie. OpenTable co-hosted it with her to celebrate Bak Mai, a fashion designer. And I got the privilege of staying after the event. So I got to see them close. Right. And the event was, it was like fancy and it was amazing food. Angie has, if you haven't been, LaBie, it's a whole thing. So I highly recommend it. But there were sponsors of the event, OpenTable being one of them. A beauty company, Revive, came and gave product out. Masterclass was also one of the sponsors because Angie was had released her masterclass on the burger.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to stay at the end of the night and watched as they like closed and cleaned. And I was just like sitting in a corner watching. And it was like everyone knew their part. It was hard work, but everyone looked like they were having fun. And at the end of the night, as each shift ended, everyone came up to her, gave her a hug, kissed goodbye. And it just really felt like family.
Mm.
Like it felt like a type of intimacy that you only have with family.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved seeing that. And like the one thing I loved, like Angie's known as, being a tough cookie. Like she doesn't hold back. And we had product that was left over, like high-end luxury product. And she had her GM, who was signing off for the night. The GM was like probably in her early 30s. And Angie was like, take the product. And GM's like, no, this stuff is like so expensive. And she's like, it's the last ones. Like, you keep it. And she's like, no, you take it. Like, SPF is really important. Like, like she gave the whole, it was just such a beautiful moment. Like just watching all of it. I don't know. Like, it felt very special. And it just like really struck me where like when it goes right, when you treat your people well, when you take care of them, right? Like, what that creates.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just very lovely to watch. And so that one's stuck with me for a while. But yeah, I have a lot of those.
I'm sure you do. We could save that for another 4 podcasts. I'm sure just on the brawling and the in-person meetings.
Yeah, exactly. I also get ghosted on all the time. People won't show up. So like on the other end of the spectrum,
really,
I will fly to a place and we will have a meeting set up. I will show up at the restaurant and sometimes they don't show. That happens too. So it's everything in between.
Oh, I thought that was only happening in dating. I guess it's in. I guess it's happening. The ghosting is big in business as well now. So Debbie, you mentioned like really the depth of restaurants within the OpenTable portfolio, and you've recently launched the OpenTable Icons. But I want you to talk about that. But I want you to talk about how the platform has changed with this new edition of Icons and how you're better servicing everyone within their particular categories.
Yeah, that's a great question. To be honest, the main impetus of Icons was when we had our product ready, right, in a place where I'm like, okay, we can try to go after some of, the awarded or really hot trending restaurants. And the feedback that we heard, especially from awarded restaurants, were like, hey, your product is sick. Like, I love what you guys have been doing. But like, if I look at the other restaurants in my neighborhood on OpenTable, like some of them are not necessarily what I would consider to be my comp set. Like they're great restaurants, but like we're very, very different, right? So if you buy a nice house, you want to make sure that the houses around you are also really nice.
Sure. Yeah.
And so this idea of Icons of giving certain restaurants a special place and home on our website was born, right? We love that we have breadth, right? All day, every day, I want to be serving the entire plane.
Mm-hmm.
I love that, right? I would love for diners to come to us for all of their dining occasions, because it's not like most people don't go to 3 Michelin stars every night.
No.
Right? They vary it up. And I just want to make sure that, whatever night it is, I have something for you.
Mm-hmm.
But specifically on this, we talked about brand, right? And lots of restaurants in certain cities of a certain tier very much care about their brand. Understandably so.
Yeah,
so they want to make sure, right, that the platform that they're on accurately reflects the brand that they have been building for all of these years. And so Icons was born as a way for us, for the restaurants, to really differentiate. Hey, if you are in this class or tier of Icons, you really set the standard. You've redefined the dining scene in the city that you're in, for example. Right, you're really very, very special. And it looks different. The photos are different. Mm-hmm. The description is different, right? And we're going to be doing more with that as well.
Yeah, I would assume so.
Yeah. And then for the diners, you know exactly where to go if you're looking for a certain type of experience, right? You don't have to go sift through the thousands of restaurants.
More than a booking tool and more discovery ability.
That's exactly right. So for us, it was like a no-brainer to launch, and it's shocked. It's shocked to me. Like We had 2-3 Michelin star restaurants for when you become an icon and an icon's launches in the city you're in. I personally send an email to each of the icons, and we had like very awarded restaurants responding to me saying, we are so excited and honored to be an Open Table icon. Right. So it's incredible that like there's this cachet associated with something that like we kind of made up.
I love that, because you're like, we just made this up and like, thank you, I guess.
Yeah,
like,
but it's like so wonderful. And like, it's not like, right, there are like very objective qualifications, right? We look at all of the things, but yeah, like it's the impact it's had on, existing icons. And for us, when we're going after new prospects and icons, has been insane. Like I've been blown away at how much both diners and restaurants care.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the qualifications. What are those qualifications? And is Icons already launched across all cities right now? And maybe you can give some examples in certain cities of the type of restaurants that are on the Icons platform.
Sure. So I think we have probably 10 to 15 more cities that we're going to launch this year for Icons specifically, but it's live in major cities. So think of any, San Francisco, New York, Miami, Chicago, LA, right? We've just launched the cities in Texas. So they're coming at a pretty good clip. The objectives are this. You have earned 1 or plus more Michelin stars. Okay. Mm-hmm. You are a James Beard winner. We also look at the demand of your restaurant, how often people are searching for your restaurant, not necessarily booking, right? Because then, the volume restaurants would really have a leg up. But like how often, like we have Notify Me list, right? So how often are people putting on that notification for your restaurant? And then there is some like art and subjectivity to it. So for example, in San Francisco, House of Prime Rib is an icon, right? You can't get a reservation for House of Prime Rib. Like you really can't. Like I can't. I have to like beg an account manager to email or call them. Yeah. They're like, okay, the best we can do is 10 p.m. I'm like, I got kids. That's like not going to work. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And the House of Prime Rib is an institution in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. Right. They have redefined dining in this city. Right. So there is an example where like, yes, the demand is very, very high. Not sure they're winning James Beard or Michelin, right? In recent years, at least. But like that is a San Francisco icon. So that's one example. Others are like in Chicago, Virtue with Chef Eric Williams. Mm-hmm. He's a past James Beard winner. Yeah. He does a tremendous amount for the community. And like his food is just damn good, you know? So like we have, Cato is another one, right? I know you just had them both last week. Love John and Ryan. Fantastic. They're amazing. I loved listening to their stories. But their restaurant is incredible. Yeah. They're incredible. And like we said in that episode, like John said, all ships rise, as the tide's rising. And so like, I think it's exciting for the city of LA to be highlighted in that way. And I love that the community element of what they're doing and how they were like, hey, if you're coming in town, go to these restaurants. Mm-hmm. Like that's what we need. That's what we need in this space. Yeah. So those are some examples. But yeah, I loved that episode and they are great. Yeah. Well, what a great partner for Open Table to have. That's fantastic. So talk a little bit about the Visa Dining Collection. Did this launch in congruence with the icons like as well? Because I know it came around at the same time, but why was this partnership important? I know it came about pretty quickly as well. Yes. A year ago, I was in a conference room with my exec team and we were doing 2024 and beyond planning, right? Mm-hmm. And we were looking at the numbers and, it had been a goal for the company to really try to get, top, elite, really hot awarded restaurants. And we've been trying and we had some success, but like not enough momentum. Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, why? The product is great. They're telling us it's great. Mm-hmm. And the answer was like, well, like in some cases, our competitors are paying them. And so, right, cash is cash. Cash is king. Cash is king. So king we were like, the main message from that meeting was like, all right, well, we got to go get ourselves some credit card money. Like, cause we don't have the funds to do it ourselves. Mm-hmm. But let's find a credit card company who wants to go up against Amex Resi, right? And are willing to pay restaurants for holding back inventory during prime time.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went out and we reached out to various issuers, card networks, and we ultimately chose Visa for their size and their scale and how quickly they were able to move. But we did that to level the playing field because the playing field was not level. We did not have those resources to be able to put money in restaurants' pockets.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really thankful we did, because a few months after we inked our deal with Visa, right, then Resi and Amex came out and announced their acquisition of Tock.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So now once the deal closes, Tock could have access to American Express funds. I would assume that they would.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so we'd be kind of left holding the bag if we hadn't made that move when we did. But it's like what we love about Visa too is if you look at the Visa Dining Collection restaurants, it's different than Icons, even though.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. Even though, right, the two programs came out at the same time. And Visa was really concerned. They're like, we don't want just awarded. We don't want fine dining. Like, we want some fine dining. We really want it to be a mix of what's going on in that neighborhood. So there's hidden gems, neighborhood spots, right? All the way up to 2-3 Michelin stars. And that was something like I very much respect them for pushing for that, right? Because they're like, hey, we want to make sure that the community feels supported, that it's not just certain restaurants, right? It's like all types of restaurants are being recognized in it.
Well, I think that's very in alignment with you all and the depth of your portfolio, but I think it's in alignment with the card holders that that Visa has, as well, because they have a lot of depth.
That's right.
And they're not just servicing one specific customer.
That's right.
So if, let's say I'm an eligible card holder, what's the process like? How exactly am I sort of getting into the system?
So you would take out your likely blue Visa card. Okay.
Got it out.
On OpenTable's platform, let's say, LA, right? There should be a banner when you go in onto our website or open the app introducing the Visa Dining Collection in LA.
Mm-hmm.
You would click, and then it would ask you to verify your card. So you'd put in your card information and see if your card is eligible for this perk. It's Visa's Infinite cards that are eligible. Most people don't know what that means. What it is, right? So, like, for example,
I don't know what that means.
Yeah,
and I'm a Visa card holder.
Yeah, no, me too. I had to check. It's for if you have a Chase card, for example, it's the Chase Sapphire Reserve.
Got it.
Is a Visa Infinite card.
Yeah.
And so, if you do happen to have, for example, that card, then it says, "Oh, you've unlocked all these time slots." So then if you go onto the main page for Visa Dining Collection, you see all these restaurants. Cato in LA is one of them, right?
Yep.
Where maybe 6:30 on a Friday night is a blue button that shows availability, but only the card holder can see that. If I don't have that card, I can't see that.
Yeah.
Right? So it's very similar to what others are doing.
Sure.
But that's why we felt very strongly about launching Icons at the same time.
Yeah.
Because while the credit card partnerships could be shown as a velvet rope, keeping people out, right? You have to have a certain card. Icons, I want to make sure is accessible to all OpenTable diners, right? You don't have to have a card. You don't have to, you just have to have, come book, come look, come discover.
Yeah.
Right. And we make it very easy for you to actually find the time slot that you need. Right. So we'll show you, hey, at Addison in San Diego, the next available slot for 3 people, which is what you're looking for, is November 3rd. You don't have to go through each day. So we want to make it we want to democratize access. We want to make it super easy, right? So that the people who are saving all year to go to an Addison also have a very easy way to get into those restaurants.
Yeah. Hey, you have to make it easy on your restaurant partners, but make it easy on the diner. Let's not go jump through hoops.
That's right.
Necessarily. You mentioned AI earlier, but I've heard you talk about your differentiation from competitors and refer to the tech. And you're like, we stand by our product, you've said. and continue to involve.
Sounds like something I would say.
Yeah, because you did say it, and continue to evolve and invest in that product. How will the product continue to evolve and expand? And does that have to do with what you were mentioning earlier about AI at all, or ultimately, how does that benefit restaurants and diners?
The product will definitely continue to evolve, right? Because the needs of our restaurants and our diners continue to evolve. AI will most definitely be a part of that evolution, and it's already starting, right? So on the restaurant side, that product, for example, this has been out for a few months now. Mm-hmm. Some restaurants respond to all online reviews. So someone will manually go in and read all the reviews on OpenTable, on Yelp, on Google, TripAdvisor, and respond to it. So we created a chatbot that will respond for you. You can edit, you can do whatever you want, but it's in the tone that you write in. It's trained on your previous responses. So some restaurants love it because it's saving someone hours a day. Yeah. Right? They still get and then we can, we're parsing out the feedback, making sure the restaurant is receiving it. Right. So that's just one example. Another example is, right, like some restaurants don't want to be answering the phone anymore, but people still call in to make reservations or changes or dietary restrictions. So there are companies, Poly AI, Sling AI are two examples, who have voice bots who can, chat and converse, and then we're integrated with them. So then all that information that the diner called with gets automatically associated with their reservation in guest notes, whatever it is. There's a lot we can be doing on just the wealth of data that we have, right? Just even going back to reviews, right? We have reviews from all of the sources, not just reviews on us. Mm-hmm. So we should be able to use AI to really pluck out, hey, we're seeing this theme a lot. And we're seeing it always Fridays at 5 p.m. that the service is slow. Mm-hmm. There are things that would take a human a really long time to sift through, where an AI, it would be very fast.
Instantaneous.
Right? So we have to be providing that insight back to restaurants so they can action upon it. And on the consumer side, I mean, this is we're working on it, but imagine, think about what you need to do now if you have family in town. So my mother-in-law is gluten-free, and she has a lot of anxiety about being gluten-free. I'm she's from Buffalo. So when you come to California, all the restaurants will have an option, right?
I was going to say, this is gluten-free heaven.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm looking for a family-friendly, has gluten-free options, but still nice and elevated Italian food.
Yeah.
Try searching for that right now. It's very, very hard.
Yeah.
And so AI could
you're
make
just relying on Google and the algorithm
right
now. So that's super interesting. That's
coming next year. We typically don't like talking about, but this is not what's coming. It's not live yet, but this is not revolutionary.
Yeah.
All the companies in our space should be thinking about this.
Everybody's thinking about it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's important. I mean, I think it's just aiding in a better experience for both the restaurants and the consumers. I said earlier, obviously you're owned by Booking Holdings, and you're part of that ecosystem, which includes, I think, Kayak and Priceline. How does that ecosystem benefit OpenTable? Is there a lot of cross promotion, cross pollination? Do you see a lot of stuff coming from Priceline when people are booking, or is it sort of operated separately?
The brands are operated very separately. Mm-hmm. There is not very much cross pollination, and I would argue that there should be.
I was going to say that isn't that a mistake?
Yes, there you go. I would say the original impetus for Booking to purchase OpenTable was this idea of, hey, when people travel, they got to eat, right? And it's not like that premise is defunct. I mean, that is very much true.
Yeah.
Right. And I think
most people are traveling to eat.
Exactly.
Now.
Exactly.
Debbie,
Exactly. And so I think we do need to do a better job of stitching together all these brands, right? And making sure that it's about capturing the traveler or diner at the right moment of their booking journey. You don't want to be presenting the restaurant options too soon if they haven't even chosen the hotel they're staying at.
Sure.
right? And so all the other travel brands have been working on, right? Like Booking.com, for example, is really focused on flights, right? Because they're historically a hotel brand.
Yeah.
So now they've introduced flights, which is like even higher up in your booking travel funnel, right? But I do think we are working on that internally to see if we can really try to unlock the synergies. OpenTable would love it, right? Because Booking.com, for example, in Europe is, they're a very beloved brand in Europe. And so can you imagine if every one of those people coming to the US, for example, or any of the other markets we're live in?
It's massive.
Yeah, and got tapped into, this network
who do
of
I need to
amazing
call,
restaurants.
Debbie? Who do I need to call? Do I need to call someone?
We know it's untapped potential. It's a matter of all the brands prioritizing it. And that's the sometimes the great thing, and sometimes I guess the not so great thing about being pretty separate, right? Yeah. Each brand has their own set of priorities and things that they need to get to. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I trust, I know within a corporation, it's very challenging for the right hand to shake the left. That's sometimes.
Right. That's right.
It's just, it just is what it is. Speaking globally or even domestically, what are the important markets right now, and sort of where are you seeing the growth?
We're primarily we're seeing growth everywhere, including US, which is our largest market. But the international markets, so Canada, Mexico here in North America, Australia, the UK, Germany, are all growing faster than our more mature markets, right? And that's to be expected. We expect to continue to expand geographically. We've already started in France and Italy, right? So we've gotten some good wins there. We're going to continue to do that. We will likely be going into Asia Pacific more. So we have a presence in Taiwan. That's through a partnership. But I would not be surprised, right, if early next year we weren't in some of the major dining hubs where a large portion of people speak or can understand English outside of Australia, right? So Singapore, Hong Kong should be, if things go well, should be on that list as well. Because the thing is, you have to invest in the new markets to make sure you grow. Yeah. I mean, we are nowhere near saturation point here in the US, but because it's such a much bigger base, to really grow that takes a lot.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure we're planting the seeds in new markets so that like the company continues to thrive and grow and be sustainable.
Well, also just like the global dining community, globalization is just expanded. It's amazing. Yes. It's like people are traveling all the time for work, for pleasure. Culinary has become one of the top drivers, I feel, for, culinary tourism. It's it's massive right now. And so, there could be diners who are in LA that you have, but, it's like, I'm going to South Africa and I'm going to Europe, here shortly. And so, I do like, I don't know if I opted into this on OpenTable, but, the last time I landed in New York, Debbie, immediately when I landed, it was like, hey, do you want to book a reservation? And I was like, oh, I actually had never gotten that before. So
it's relatively new, I would say, in the last year and a half. And you are not the only one who has mentioned that, but don't you find it kind of useful?
No.
And by the way, you did opt in at one point. We didn't just push this.
Clearly, I did. I mean, I was like, or maybe Debbie just put me on this thing. I don't know. No, it's great. It's very useful. I do like that, and hopefully, I'm someone who utilizes the app already, especially in this city. You all have done such an incredible job in Los Angeles. But yeah, I mean, there's so much to book, elsewhere, in the world. There's so much work that you've done already. There's so much work to come. But I want to ask, what do you want restaurants to say about OpenTable?
That we took really good care of them and that we have their back. That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
That it's a no-brainer to partner with us. And that we have their best interest at heart.
I love that. I love that. And then the diner, as you're sort of extending the olive branch, so to speak, to the diner a little bit more, how do you want them to think about OpenTable?
I want to give diners a reason to come book on OpenTable directly, because right now I don't think that exists. You can book on Google, you can, book on OpenTable, you can book on the restaurant website. But I want diners to think, oh, but if I book on OpenTable, I get this. Now, this could be in the form of loyalty points, right? It could be in the form of availability, maybe that you don't see other places. It could be OpenTable knows me so well, right? And this is like back to AI, like, can we personalize? Right? Imagine, Gabriel, if, we know where you're dining in LA, like we literally know.
Yeah.
So when you land in Chicago, for example, like we can say, hey, based on your dining activity in LA, these are some of the restaurants we think you would really like in Chicago. Right? So there are things that we can really do. We're in a unique position to offer the diner to help them discover better, to help them book, all of those things. But yeah, I would say for diners, like give them a real reason to come to us and book, discover and book.
Yeah, I love that. I also love and excited to see how this continues to develop with the use of AI and other tools of just make my life easier and better, Debbie. Yes. Like that same thing. When I land someplace, go, yeah, we know you love this, and this. And I obviously that's what Spotify did so well in the music space. And obviously
they helped me discover so much music. Totally. Yeah.
That's it. So, continuing to be to fuel that discovery, yes, I think is a massive added value to the consumer. Obviously a value to the restaurant as well. But as a consumer myself, I'm like, yeah, I want to know what I don't know. So help me.
Yes. That's exactly right.
I think that's super exciting. And I envision potentially another conversation on this podcast and many other conversations for us as things continue to evolve, as things continue to grow. But I end every show with asking, what's a life lesson you can leave us with?
Well, first of all, I would love to come back, but you got to make me earn it, Gabriel. So that consumer site better be looking a little bit different. Okay, make me earn it. Make me work for it.
I'm going to check back in.
I know.
I'm going to check back in.
A life lesson. Yeah, I would say one for me personally, and I think the chefs and operators I really gravitate towards hold this mantra as well, is the harder I work, the luckier I get. And I do really believe that. Like luck for sure is a staple in life. You have to have that.
Yeah.
But working really hard really helps grease the wheel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a friend who used to say timing and light. It's the right timing, but you have to be in the right light as well. Yes. And that's that luck part.
Right.
And it is. I love that. I think that's so important. Same with me in my career. So I'm excited for you and the team. I'm excited to see how how OpenTable continues to expand both on the icons with the Visa Dining Collection into new, into new regions. And I'll touch back in, and we'll see how things are going.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. It's been such a pleasure.
On the Pass is hosted and produced by me, Gabriel Ornelas, and edited and mixed by Dylan Agajanian, with original music by Dylan Agajanian.